Barrister.
Howdy.
It's been a long time since I felt like I was at home and feeling normal. First time in like a month and a half.
Super. Yeah, well, we live in abnormal times. Although I suppose almost any generation would probably say that at some point in their lifelong journey.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Every generation thinks, oh, the previous generations fucked it up for all of us.
Yeah, and which is probably true.
Yeah.
So let's see. So I guess Sam Chen will not be here today, and
Nope.
don't know if anybody else is going to come.
Does Stacy plan on joining? I actually don't remember, but there was one thing I wanted to conclude with Stacy if she does arrive.
Yeah. Well, let me just see if there's any evidence of her even being online yet this morning. Let's see. Did she? Well, at 10:43, which is 50 minutes ago, she was present in the barn raising messenger because she saw the item I posted, although nobody responded to it.
Mm-hmm.
At least she's awake and online. And for all we know, having breakfast or walking the dog.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to address one issue head on because I think it's kind of been something that has been noticed by a number, and I think I'm going to be unapologetic about it. This is my consistent criticism of irrational thought, and in particular, religious thought. Now, I know I have to do this also with you carefully because I know you come from a very well-trained background around theology and theosophy and analytic theology, etc.
Yeah, there's quite a distinction between the church or religious institutions and theology. One of them has a very deep intellectual background, abstract thinking, and the rest of it is very kindergartenish, because if you work out guidelines for a very complex system, as you might do in systems thinking and technology, the optimal practices generally don't do well if you reduce them to trivial rules of thumb. But for humans, you can't really expect people to do real-time deep reasoning. So you give them shortcut rules of thumb, which are pretty good most of the time. And that's the best you can do with most people.
But see, here's the thing. You can give people shortcuts like how to multiply by 9, et cetera, et cetera. But at least, those shortcuts can be double-clicked and you can actually go into the detail and understand why it works, right? So every useful shortcut should have a grounding in it that is at least rational and defensible and makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any issue with those kind of shortcuts.
Yeah.
The shortcuts I have issue with are those ones where it's just because the Bible says it is, or just because God told me so,
That's not a shortcut in theology. That's what people will say when they can't think, they can only echo what they read that somebody else thought for them.
Right.
And they don't even do a very good job of reading and interpreting.
Right. So in other words, I would love, maybe you're the one, Barry, I would love to have that conversation with somebody who understands the roots of theology so well that we can actually go and trace back how theology and religion started as science, started as a way to understand the universe.
Well, the word Torah, the Hebrew word Torah, is a cognate of theoria, which is the Greek word for theory or I behold. And in modern Hebrew dictionary, Torah as a lowercase word literally means theory or science.
Yeah. So I like that. I like that. So if indeed religion and theology starts as a way to understand the world, then almost by definition, it has to start with observations about the world.
Exactly.
Which means that if you get more observation, more input from the world, that should refine your understanding that was evolved at any given point. At T0, you have another T delta, you get more information. You should be able to incorporate that into your theology/religion.
Yes, and the best theologians are very candid about doing that. They update the understanding incrementally over the decades and centuries and millennia, but the fundamentalist factions do not.
Yes.
Fundamentalists take what was written originally and take that as gospel,
yeah,
without continuing the process. Now, at least in my upbringing and in conservative and liberal Judaism, it's a continual process. The rabbis down through the ages kept debating and refining their interpretation, their understanding, and their reasoning and their thinking. And so the Mishnah and I forget the other terms they use for all these, these continuing conversations, they really beat the hell out of these concepts to try to interpret them for modern thinking. Moses ben Maimon, Ramban, is a good example. He was a physician, practiced medicine around 1200, I think is his years. And he wrote a book called Guide of the Perplexed. And it's all about thinking your way through afresh at his stage in history. And if you read his book, his whole book reads like a Socratic dialogue, except that you read a passage and instantly comes to mind a question in the reader. And no sooner does the question come to mind and the reader said, then the next paragraph answers it. It's amazing how each paragraph answers the next obvious question that comes to mind.
Yeah. Hey, Kayla's joined us.
Hi, Kayla.
Hey, Kayla.
Hi. I like your
Congratulate you on your latest promotion.
Oh, thank you.
You gonna celebrate?
Nah, not a lot to do. It was okay. My celebration is the fact that I actually got it.
Oh, come on.
So Barry,
yeah,
I'm a development director now.
Super.
Yeah. So it means I continue doing what I'm doing, because I've already established like funding and fundraising for our organization, but now I get the title, yay! And then of course I get a raise. So it also just means that I'm going to be busier, which is fine because it is what it is, and I enjoy what I'm doing.
Not only that, you and at least one of your sons is going to be famous on the big screen.
So again, up to speed, Barry. Maxwell is in the entertainment industry. You probably already knew that, but
you had mentioned it to Anne Marie that he was auditioning for something like that.
Yeah, he auditioned for a feature film. The casting director is reviewing it because they already contacted me. But he got one commercial, and that commercial is going out in the summer, and then he got another commercial. And the funny thing is, I actually auditioned with him because they wanted a real parent, and they got both of us. So they asked both of us to do the commercial, which I thought was hilarious, because I don't think I'm Hollywood material at all, but it doesn't matter because it's only commercial. And this actually makes a lot of money. So,
did you know that Sarah Michelle Gellar, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, did a commercial for Burger King when she was, I think, about 4 or 5 years old?
Yes. So What I've noticed about the entertainment industry is a lot of these actors who actually get famous and they have their big break have been in it for some time now. But you wouldn't know because they were, mostly in commercials, or they started off as children doing this. But, a lot of the actors, like for instance, Samuel Jackson, that's his name, right? Samuel L. Jackson.
Right.
He didn't get his big break until he was almost 50. But he started, I think in his 30s or 20s or something like that. But him, Morgan Freeman, I mean, some of them don't even make it big until they're much older.
Yeah. But they have stage presence from the beginning. They're very comfortable and photogenic in front of the camera and very natural. And that is a minimum requirement. If you're nervous or fumble your lines, you're never going to get anywhere in performance.
But think about the decades of experience that got them there that we don't see. That's what Kayla's saying.
That's the point. They were doing, what you'd call schlock, but they were practicing, the art of performance, even though they weren't doing anything literary. It was just banal.
Yes, yeah. And the funny thing is Maxwell's been having challenges at school because he doesn't really, fit the normal kid prototype, especially here in conservative Ventura County. Ventura County is a lot more conservative than a lot of people know. But anyway, this is good for him because he enjoys it and he gets to connect with kids that are like him, kids that are just have like a little different sense of humor, or they're into entertainment and they act kind of silly. So I started discovering that about Maxwell a couple of years ago, and we're running with it.
Super. Well, you can tell Maxwell, and it will take him a while to get this term because it's Latin. Tell him he is sui generis, SUIGENERIS, sui generis, one of a kind, in a class by himself.
Oh, okay.
and the reason I know that term is that the first time I went to talk to a psychotherapist about issues that I was wrestling with in real life, and he interviewed me for a while, he said, Barry, he says, you're sui generis, you're in a class by yourself. That's where I learned the term.
Yep. Unfortunately, it runs in our family.
Unfortunately, but all the great contributors to the advance of civilization were sui generis, almost by definition. Leonardo, or pick anybody who made a major contribution, they were in a class by themselves. The one and only Groucho, the one and only, right? They were unique among their peers. They were the oddball, the odd bird, the one, the standout. But eventually that made them possible to do something nobody else could do.
Right.
So Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, sui generis. Why do you think that song was so popular? It was the oddball.
Yeah.
The oddball who can do something nobody else can do.
And it's interesting, when we grow up, we all feel like the outsider, the outcast, the one who's not included.
And I can prove it. I actually have the evidence to show that I was thrown out of a lot of communities.
It's a badge of honor, huh, Barry?
I was actually in Time magazine. For being thrown out of a chat room way back when chat rooms were the very first, big thing on the internet. There's an article called Chat Room Exiles, and I was one of the featured characters in that story in Time magazine.
You have it?
Yeah, it's on my website. I can give you a link to it if you want to read it.
Yes.
Let's see if I can find it.
If I continue your streak, Barry, I'll throw you out of this and then you can read it.
I got thrown out of John Keldon's conversations community on Facebook. I got thrown out of Wikipedia by Jimmy Wales, the founder.
Yep.
Personally threw me out.
Yep. So what is it about them that we don't have? I guess I haven't thrown you out yet, Barry.
What do they have? The ability to exploit people.
Wow.
And do so in a, I don't want to use the word unethical. That's the wrong word, but exploitative manner, I guess, is really. I mean, people who get famous exploit the work of others in maybe, I don't know, unjust manner. I don't really quite know how to phrase it.
All those words are similar: unethical, manipulative,
Manipulative, yeah, or yeah, manipulative. So there, it's a bit sociopathic in some sense, taking advantage of people's weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
So to get, you remember the famous Tom Sawyer scene with whitewashing the fence, painting the white fence, and he gets all the other kids to do the work by making it seem like it's a wonderful thing to be able to paint the fence. I mean, that's your classical manipulative technique. I mean, it's a major trope right there in Tom Sawyer.
and it's admired.
Well, that's called leadership, quote unquote. Let's see, what's gonna.
So what's going on later today, Kayla?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, which reminds me, I have a hard stop at 9 because one of the organizations that I'm writing for, they've got a live, so they're going to talk about their mission in the Philippines, and then I have to pick up Maxwell's friend, and then we're going to have pedicures, and then I have to go back home and write. What's going on with you guys?
Well, I have still been recovering from my India trip. And in fact, from 5 p.m. Friday till about an hour ago, I was pretty much sleeping the entire time, other than a 1-hour meeting yesterday at 11. And then went out to dinner for sushi last night. And then other than that, I've just been sleeping the entire time since Friday at 5 o'clock.
That's good.
And only now do I feel remotely normal, because I was so tired, even at dinner last night. And that was already after like 24 hours in bed.
I had sushi too last night.
Nice.
I put that link to Chat Room Exiles in the chat.
I see it.
I'm opening it now.
Yeah, let me know for
Sorry.
sure that. Let me know for
Round.
sure that the link works for you, because it's on my server here in the house, so it's got a funny URL.
Oh my gosh, look at your picture. You're young.
I mean, Barry didn't start out this way.
Let me load it and see. Well, I have to tell you about that picture. When Time Magazine wanted to do that story, they sent a professional photographer out to my house to take that picture. And the only place where we could get a good background, like it stand against a wall, was actually down the basement, because it had a cement cinder block wall, and that was sort of the background that he thought was going to be best. And then he lit it. And he wanted me to be in a pose that was, what did he call it? Who's the actor who was in Rebel Without a Cause?
James Dean.
Yeah.
He wanted a James, no, at the time I didn't really know who James, I mean, I knew the name, but I didn't know. He wanted a James Dean demeanor. So he was posing me to put my face in a position that kind of picked up the James Dean demeanor. And that's why I look in kind of that unusual kind of, I don't know what you would call that. But that's how I got that picture. That was taken by a professional photographer for that story. And then after that, I went and got the movie Rebel Without a Cause, just to get a beat on who James Dean was.
So in this
Wow.
article, it's actually not clear how you and Andrew Went started this thing.
Oh, so I had started an online learning community called MuseNet, which
Mhm.
was a MUD, if you remember what MUDs were.
Yes.
And Andrew Went was a teenager who was on it, and his avatar name was what was it? Does it say there what his name was? It was Pig something. I can't remember now. Power Pig. He called himself Power Pig. That was his avatar name. And what he did is he would stress the system and cause it to generate content that was junk, which would then enlarge the database. And he kind of dealt me fits. He was always trying to do things, you know, to create havoc. And I was very, very patient with him because I was trying to turn him around. And I never did turn him around, but I was very patient with him. And so he was, in fact, when they interviewed me for the story, I put them on to him. I put the writer of the story on to Andrew Went, because I said, here's an example of a youngster who was, you know, disruptive and you know, not being a good citizen. So, and that's just an excerpt. That's the paragraph from the whole article is beyond just that part that I excerpted. That was the portion of it that was about me.
Mm-hmm.
And also Kai. So I got kicked out of not Utney Reader, but Cafe Utney, which was one of the very first online discussion forums. And Kai Hagen was the Uber host of it. And Kai Hagen kicked me out of Cafe Utney. So I'd been kicked out of Cafe Utney, which was sort of this big chat room system. And so they interviewed him too. And so I have this long history of being kicked out of communities. I have to tell you a funny story about getting kicked out of Cafe Utney. You can register, when you register on a site like Cafe Utney, you have to give an email address. But then you can make up an avatar name that's arbitrary. So I would generate a new email address and re-register under a pseudonym. And because my writing style is so instantly recognizable, after about a paragraph, they said, oh, that's Barry. They could recognize me. So finally, after I sort of got a feeling for how to get back in and not have them recognize me, by sort of writing all lowercase and not with punctuation and, you know, not with highfalutin vocabulary, I came back in, and my avatar name was General Haiku, H-A-I-K-U, General Haiku, and the login, the short login name was Genhaika, Genhaika, General Haiku, Genhaika. And I stayed on for a month before he discovered that Genhaika was an anagram of Kai Hagen.
Okay, that's funny, Barry.
It takes a while to get it, but see, there I was using an anagram of his own name, and he didn't recognize me for a month.
Sorry, I went off video so I could blow my nose.
Okay. So, yeah, he would keep making up rules, and the only purpose of the rule was to make something I was doing against the rules. So he had all these specially devised rules just to rule out anything that I was doing. And I was very creative about coming up with a way to get around the rules without violating the rules.
Well, wait. He'd make the rules after you joined?
Oh, so if I was doing something that he didn't like, he would devise a rule so that whatever practice I was doing that he didn't like was now against the rules. But I was the only one doing that practice because I'm sort of a creative guy, right? So he kept making up these rules just for me, and I kept figuring out a way to not violate them in the rule, but violate them in the spirit. That is, do something he doesn't like. So he eventually kicked me out, and that sort of led to that story in Time magazine.
So can I ask you, is there a part of you that is actually quite proud of the fact that you're being kicked out of various different places? And are you disappointed that you haven't been kicked out of GCC?
Well, first of all, I'm not ashamed or embarrassed of the fact of having been kicked out of.
It doesn't appear that you are, yeah.
I'm not. I mean, I got kicked out of Wikipedia. I got kicked out of Cafe, and I got kicked out of John Keldon's Conversations group,
Mhm.
and some others. I mean, I sort of lost track of the list of them now. I'm not embarrassed or ashamed about it, because I think it's very interesting to understand what am I doing that is causing people who have an exercise power, autocratic power, to throw me out.
Yeah,
Make me an
what have you
outcast.
come up with?
I'm sorry,
What have you come up with?
what did I come up with?
Yeah.
It's a kind of creativity that overthrows misconceptions, where the misconception is the religion of the person who's throwing me out. I'm overthrowing their idiosyncratic beliefs and practices, which is sort of like a private religion.
So if those were not encoded in the code of conduct or the rules of engagement, then they would have to resort to new rules that they make up in order to make you wrong, right?
Exactly.
Well, in any of those cases, was it the case that the rules of engagement or the code of conduct from the beginning were the ones that they claim you violated?
Correct. They would have to keep making up. I was engaging in creative and intellectual content that in academia would be fine. There's nothing wrong with it in academia. You could go into a college and do the same thing. It'd be perfectly fine. But these guys were sort of had their own, maybe, I don't know if you should call it a hidden agenda, but sort of their concept. They were the guys in charge, and they were going to regulate the content and the flow and all this kind of stuff. And so I would do things that didn't violate those. It just, but they were outside of the scope of the community. For example, I would put stuff on my own website. I would put stuff on my website that they took exception to.
I saw a reference to that. They said that quoting some of that material, I guess, according to them, was against the rules of engagement there.
But it
Is
wasn't.
that true?
I mean, he created that rule after the fact. Now, here's the funny thing. So the people on the site would go to my website to see what I was writing on my website. They would visit my website. Now, when you visit a website, it leaves a log record of somebody connected at such a time from such and such an IP, etc. And so a lot of people thought that I was putting disparaging stuff on my website about them. So they would go to my website and guess, basically using their own name or their avatar name. They would go to my website and try out a URL that was based on their name. And most of the time they would get back a no such word. But Apache would record all these attempts to look for non-existent web pages. So one of the people who had done that had, I don't know, maybe a dozen attempts at guessing their name. So I created one with that name. And what I put in it was the log of all the failed attempts to reach that name.
That's hilarious, Barry. That's hilarious.
So the one that I did it to was, or the one that was the best one, Heather Clitheroe was a Canadian woman, and she thought maybe that I had put one with her name, Heather. So eventually I create one with her name and I put in all the attempts, and she gets to it and she laughs. and we become good friends to
That's
this
good.
day. To
That's
this
very
day,
good.
she's a friend of mine. But the other ones who took umbrage, they were embarrassed. But all I did was reveal that they had been knocking on my door, looking for something that they could complain about. And
Yeah.
all that was on the door was a list of the times they knocked.
That's funnier than hell, Barry.
That's the kind of stuff I would do. It's meta. It's very, very meta. So, and you can go ask Heather. I'm sure she remembers that. But the ones who were kind of antisocial, when I exposed them in that way, they basically said, "You got to get this guy out of here. He's embarrassing the hell out of us." They didn't say that publicly, but
That's grounds for dismissal?
it was on Cafe Utney. Oh, by the way, after Cafe Utney went off the air, Kai Hagen went into politics, local politics, where he lived in Maryland, I think it was. And he got elected to the county supervisors, whatever they call it. And he got involved in some kind of shenanigans with the funding, and they voted him out of office. But he was engaging in the same sort of personal autocratic, behavior in politics, and it caught up with him.
But
He didn't learn. He did
it
not
was
learn.
regarding funding. Was it misuse of funds?
I don't remember the
Serious.
details, and I probably could go back and find them, because we're talking about 20 years ago. But some journalist in town wrote up a story about this shenanigans and published it in the local paper, and that basically exposed him for his, I don't know if corruption is the correct word, but shenanigans is probably a better word. It's not being transparent in his practices. Go ahead.
So Barry, while you've been speaking, and a lot of what's been talked about the last many sessions converges in a single thought. And that is, number one, there's been a deplorable lack of integrity now in modern day journalism, number one.
Yep.
And number two, there's been therefore a rampant a rise of untruth, of just lies, just alternative facts,
Yep.
I think this whole fourth estate of journalism needs to be revived. And I don't know how to do it other than to get a bottoms up groundswell of some kind of did you ever read a book from Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land?
I know the title. I'm not sure I ever read it.
You got to read it. He has this group of people he calls the fair witnesses. In other words, they go through a kind of training, and they go through a vow that says they will always represent the truth, and they will never, ever represent something that is not true.
Okay, now I know.
You've had this theme before, but Heinlein was the one who codified it in a book and called them fair witnesses.
That's interesting, because
way back in the 50s and 60s, or maybe even earlier.
Yeah, when my friend Nancy Williams, who was teaching journalism at Utah State, wanted to teach online journalism, one of the things they did is they created a forum, but I created it for them because they didn't have the money to buy a nice system, and the only free one was one that I installed for them. So we installed one that was developed by San Francisco State University, and whoever wrote it, I forget the person who wrote it, the people who were the moderators on that system were called fair witnesses, and I didn't know where the term came from.
I would bet you those people read Heinlein.
Probably, but whoever created that system, it was called Conferencing on the Web, COW. That was the name of the software, and it was free. That's why I sold it, because they didn't want to cough up the money to buy Motet or whatever. So So yeah, we were called fair witnesses, and the thing about that the sites that Nancy and I had set up is they were all based on the social contract regulatory mechanism. The participants wrote the social contract, and when they joined, they voluntarily committed to abide by the social contract that they had written. There was no authority figure, there was no police. And I had said to Nancy, and she agreed with me, we do not want to be the police who were regulating people's behavior. Go ahead.
I would like something similar, but I do think there needs to be a review process.
Oh, there was.
Policing, you can call it, enforcement or whatever.
Yeah.
But in my mind, if someone says, okay, I'm going to blog about whatever's going on in my community, or I'm going to, opine about, politics or whatever, okay? They can decide to abide by some group of, I don't know, protocol, if you want to say protocol.
Yeah.
That says,
mutually agreeable terms of engagement.
Sure. But all too often you call them rules, okay? So they look like rules, okay? So what I'm saying is, if in fact there's a group, 1,000, 100,000, whatever the heck it is, okay? And these people publish, there should be some mutual review process that is allowable and in fact encouraged. So that if I say, hey, Barry, you didn't cite something here and you made a claim, would you please provide the citation? That should be allowed, and that should actually improve the general quality of what is being reported.
Yeah.
Likewise, somebody can say, why did I make this claim? Provide the substantiation for this claim, okay? And I think that should be allowed, and that will raise the general level of journalism.
Yep.
Scientific or otherwise, political, educational, whatever, okay? That should be the protocol, because up until recently, it was the management structure of these journalism companies that said, okay, this is publishable, this is not, okay?
Right.
But it was a very weak form of it, because who knows, the editor could be bought by some megalomaniac billionaire, as indeed many of them have.
Rupert Murdoch.
Exactly. And now you look at Washington Post, that's owned by Bezos. And more and more of these things are being owned by billionaires. And they now don't go against those billionaires whenever they publish anything.
Well, the Sulzberger family owned the New York Times for most of its existence.
So,
although I don't know how much editorial control the Sulzberger family, I mean, when you write the editorial page by definition is the publisher's opinion, but it's an editorial page, not the front page.
Yes, that's different from journalism. Okay?
It's when you're manipulating the front page is the problem.
Yes.
You can have your editorial opinion just fine. And you can
as long as it's identified that way and not represented as fact.
And you can have op-eds where the other side comes in and you give them an op-ed opportunity. And the New York Times, I think, and the others did the op-ed thing.
Right.
But these chat room things, they didn't want the op-ed.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? If we had some protocol like this, and we could, in a documented, well thought out set of protocols, identify where, let's say, Tucker Carlson was lying, okay, or Rupert Murdoch was definitely skewing what was being presented on Fox News, that should be allowable, and that should then discredit whoever is actually not able to defend that behavior, and that should actually then elevate the stature of those people who are actually bringing the light of truth and accountability to what's being written or espoused or broadcast in any way.
Yeah. So you want academic integrity. So you have the what do they call it in academic? The right to say what you believe or theorize. Academic freedom. So you have both academic freedom, but also then you can be queried on it, and you can't just pretend that you're not.
That's right.
Feedback.
That's right.
So it's,
you want to make a claim, you better defend it.
Exactly. So I come from this culture of academic freedom, but defending your academic expression and citing your sources and showing your methods of reasoning, revealing how did you get it? Not what's the answer to the problem, but how did you compute it? How did you derive it?
Okay.
What was your
How was the truth from the universe? Okay, that probably wouldn't fly with everybody,
Well, you can say it's an impression, which is true.
You can, use it with certain people. I do know that, but not everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the I behold, the theoria, I behold. So I look out and I behold. Now I may not see the depth of everything out there. I can't see the depth of it, but I can see at least at some level of surface, maybe not transparently all the way through to the core, but I behold, and I say I behold, and that's a true statement, as long as I'm not lying about what I behold. And then you say, well, Barry, you missed this detail, or you missed this aspect.
Yeah. Your experience is completely yours. You can describe it however you like.
Right.
But the minute you actually claim it as fact,
right,
where you go over the line.
Or you say, and you have to represent it the way I saw it. You have to say that you saw it the same way. No, you don't have to say. You can say, I perceive it this way. And then you have to, but then if you use words that are suitcase words and vague words, I have to say, well, what did you mean by that funky word? I don't know what that word means. It's vague, and it's too all encompassing. If you use pronouns or pseudo pronouns, I don't know what they mean.
So I'm thinking that a sub-refinement of the COI principles, which I've been thinking about for about 10 years or whatever, specifically oriented towards journalism.
Community of impact.
Yes. Is my next focus.
Yeah.
I have to think about this because it's going to rail against all the modern, big journalism sources.
Well, they deserve it. I mean, with the Fox News thing, especially, and the other ones, what's the other ones even worse than Fox News? Not Sinclair, but something America. I forget.
OAN, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, OAN. What does that stand for? OAN.
Something America Network, I think.
Yeah, so OAN is even more. Do I dare say fascistic? What's the right term here? Fundamentalist, whatever. And by the way, there are people who say, I won't listen to NPR anymore. In fact, I think Joshua says he doesn't listen to NPR anymore. He thinks that MSNBC and NPR are not sufficiently objective.
They may not be, but you could argue that no one is, and there's a gradation, there's a spectrum of journalistic integrity, and certainly the right-wing ones, I think, are relatively low on that journalistic integrity.
Well, you have Democracy Now! With what's her name? I'm forgetting her name, but Democracy Now! Is very liberal and left-wing.
Which doesn't mean it's not factual, okay?
Amy Goodman, yeah, Amy Goodman.
No, I don't.
She's the host of Democracy Now! And they are sort of the extreme liberal perspective. So by using them as the other end of it, you get NPR and MSC are pretty much in the middle. CBS is kind of conservative. I think ABC and NBC might be a little bit more liberal than CBS. But they were sort of mainstream. I mean, and when they had Eric Severide on, that was opinion, and he was a separate presenter from the guy who read the news.
Right. Yeah. I do think that if you do this meta level analysis of where the supporting evidence is, whose claims are you actually riding on, what claims of fact are you basing your conclusions on, if you do this epistemological analysis, it's not hard to come up with who's lying and who's not. It really isn't.
It's not hard to come up with it, but to reveal the lie to the public audience, that's what's hard. That's what's hard. I mean, you can point and counterpoint forever, and eventually you get to Jane, you ignorant slut. That's the send up of the fact that the point counterpoint ultimately never got to common ground. It got to mudslinging.
It's because there isn't a way to view all of this. It was just talking head versus talking head.
Right.
All of this has to be much bigger in context, okay? Because as long as it's talking head versus talking head, people think, oh, these two people are just balancing some argument. It's equally valid, right? That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Complete bullshit.
I mean, for a while, the point counterpoint stuff was interesting to attend to because it was very erudite. They were making
because people respected the truth on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
now it's clearly not that way.
but even when it was, I forget the names of the two characters who did Point Counterpoint, Shana Alexander and who was the guy, I forget now. Eventually it became a kind of a self-satire because they had to maintain the argument culture. They couldn't let them get to common ground because then the segment would have no point.
Right. It would lose its whole
edge. It would lose its edge.
Yeah.
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 And that sort of happened when they did the send up on Saturday Night Live with Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd. That kind of signaled the jumping the shark of the point counterpoint genre.
So anyway, that's my next focus, is to see if we can come up with some DNA that could be adopted voluntarily by individuals. Now, I understand there are already codes of conduct, but I think there ought to be one that's more collectivist, one that's more networkable, one where we could actually say, hey, if I claim that I'm now a member of this community, I agree to behave according to these protocols and these objectives, and that I agree to be accountable in the following way. And I will hold others accountable in a very similar way. I think that is what's necessary. There may be efforts to do this already, but I don't know about them, and I want to find out more about them.
So the way I think that you get to the common ground or the hybrid, which is really, I think, the way that you combine two competing positions and get to something that both can agree to and joyfully agree to, that's where the theatrical arts really excel. Your basic musical comedy is about antagonists being able to sing a duet, and they sing both sides of the duet together in harmony, and it's very entertaining. And then at the end, it's a love story. I mean, that's sort of the model for coming to common ground and hugging your enemy and making up and having a big laugh, and and they do it in the musical theater. They haven't really done it in the journalism domain yet. The journalism domain is not yet arriving at the musical comedy resolution. And that's what I've been doing with my song parodies. I've been trying, if I have a conflict, a misadventure, and it's got enough emotional energy to be disturbing, I process it by turning it into a song parody or some kind of satire or, comic opera, whatever, that ends up presenting both sides in a lighthearted manner. Now, as an artist, as artistic work goes, I'm a rank amateur. I'm not Stephen Sondheim, obviously, but it's an attempt to find a medium in which you can represent the other side in a reasonably fair way, and just get past it.
Okay, so I'm still trying to unpack what you said. Are you thinking that this protocol might be worthwhile, or are you thinking that it's...
Which protocol do you want me to comment on?
I'm thinking about a protocol that we need in order to restore journalistic integrity to people reporting on events.
Yeah, within mainstream journalism, not
any journalism, but it's got to be coming from the ground up, because I'm not going to be able to go convince anybody who's currently in charge of mainstream journalism.
Okay, so this gets back to my friend Nancy, who taught ethics in journalism at the college level to journalism students. And the main subject matter that she taught, that was the hard stuff to teach, was ethics in journalism.
Yep.
She taught ethics in journalism because if you're going to be a journalist, you've got to have a very good grounding in ethics so that you can do a fair job.
You would think, but who's in journalism today who believes that?
You could ask Nancy, she's still on Facebook.
But does she have an analysis of the journalists reporting today who are actually going to comply with those principles?
I think she would say that, at least in the Fox department and the OAN department, and maybe some of the others, that the answer appears to be a lost cause. But I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I'm thinking that she would express disappointment in what's happened to mainstream journalism, especially vis-a-vis the Fox example.
It's I would still say, I would use the word deplorable. It is deplorable.
Oh, and by the way, since you're on Facebook, even though they're all retired now, the Utah State University School of Journalism still has a Facebook group, which is visible to the public. So you don't have to be a member to read it. And at this point, because they're all retired, I'm one of the few who occasionally puts an item in that group. And mainly it's an item from like Dan Rather commenting, or somebody retiring, from a lifelong career. But you can go and read the stuff. And I have been putting into the USU Facebook group stuff of, kind of on this topic, including, what does the social networks and ChatGPT and other stuff do to the dynamics of the public discourse? And if you wanted to go in there, I think you can. I don't know if you can comment without joining or not, but you can join the group.
Yeah, if you'd send me a link to the group, I'll go take a look at it.
Let me just pull it up real quick and stick it in there, and then you can see whether or not you have to join to post or not.
By
I
the way,
don't remember if you do.
Barry, since you have such extensive language knowledge, I was wondering if you had ever commented on Walter's last name, Cronkite.
I don't remember ever looking it up, but I do remember that in the movie, what the hell's the name of the movie? I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the movie, but it was written pseudonymously, and there was a character in it whose name was Cronkite, but a different spelling.
Mm-hmm.
Candy. Remember the movie Candy?
No.
Or the story Candy by, I can't remember who wrote it. But it was published anonymously at first. And there's a character, and I think he's a surgeon whose name is Cronkite, but it's spelled K-R-A-N-K-E-I-T, I think.
Well, Krankeit is a German word.
Which means
illness.
Okay.
Or sickness. So I actually was wondering about whether or not that name had been changed just to get away from the German.
I don't know. I never actually looked up. I'm just trying to get this URL correct here so that I can give it to you.
So the few things I remember in German.
Okay, let's see if I get this right. You can tell me if it's working, because sometimes you got to futz with these Facebook URLs. Yeah, I think this is the one. I gotta go pee, and you can take a look and make sure that that's right.
Okay, 1 second also.
Let's see. Yeah. Journal, let's see. Jake, what does JCOM stand for? Journalism. Kind of forget the name of what the JCOM stood for. That was the name of the department, though. Journalism and communication or something like that. And there are at least 3 retired people, the department head, Nancy, and one other professor, I think, are reasonably still active on Facebook and will see these things. Yeah, Utah State University School of Journalism and Communication, USU JCOM, alumni and retired. So now if you look at it, you'll see that March 8th was a few days ago. I posted "Prepare for the Text Apocalypse" from the Atlantic. That was about Chat GPT. And then there's something from Bernie Sanders. So here's a person, not me, who posted something. Retirement of Judy Woodruff, that was me. Barbara Walters dies, I posted that. Ann Garrels dies, I posted that. Dan Rather commenting, was that me posting? Yeah, me posting Dan Rather. So mostly, but there's other people who are still, attending. And as far as I know, Nancy and the other two retired faculty members do look at this. They don't necessarily respond because it's just, they probably already know this stuff. I'm just,
Yeah.
I mean, back, if you scroll probably back a few years, you'll find more discussions.
Okay.
But, recently it's just kind of superficial. There's Chris Wallace leaving Fox News after 18 years. Anchor Brian Williams leaving NBC.
Since I don't watch Fox, was Chris a son of Mike Wallace?
Yes.
And how would he end up being so right-wing, so idiotic?
I don't know. I mean, his father was much more, what's the right word? Investigative reporting, I guess we would say.
Yes.
And there's also a Wallace, female Wallace on MSNBC, but she's not related. Pretty sure she's married to a different Wallace. I forget her first name. But if you wanted to try to, ask people who have education in journalism and ethics and journalism and online journalism, that would be the place to go.
Okay.
And you can see whether or not you can comment with or without registering in the group.
I just joined and it let me join.
Okay. Some of these people, besides the faculty, some of the students I actually did do a little bit of work with. Occasionally Nancy would link one of her students up with me for some little activity. We're talking about back in the 90s, really, quite a
Well,
lot.
I like this article about Sanders proposing this new deal for journalism. This is good.
Yeah, and of course, Sanders is a systems thinker. He's one of the very few systems thinkers, at that high level of politics. And he doesn't get very far because people like us who are into systems thinking, we don't get a lot of airtime. We get thrown out of chat rooms.
Well, he's gotten thrown out of a lot of places, but I would have to say he is remarkable in his resolve and his consistency of thinking and principles.
Yeah. So, feel free to jump in. Maybe you'll get a reaction, probably more likely from the alumni students than from the faculty, but
that's fine.
Because
there's a place to start.
I mean, Nancy is, I think, 2 or 3 years younger than me. I'm 78, so she's around 75. And,
What's her last name, just for reference?
Her name is Nancy Matlack Williams. Matlack's her maiden name, Williams is her married name. And she is still married. And her husband, Brian Williams, has the same name, but is not the Brian Williams, but just happens to have the same name.
Okay. So Barry, considering this, and I just woke up from about 30 hours of sleep, and I'm very much looking forward to brunch. Would you be willing to say this is a good hour and let's continue next weekend?
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to give you the correct spelling of her middle name. It's Matt Lack, not Matt Black.
Matt Lack. Okay. All right. Got it.
So yeah, and I'll say, so yeah, we can, I don't think Kayla's coming back, although she said she was going to come back, but she didn't. So
No, I
yeah,
think she had a hard stop at 9.
Oh, she did. Okay. So yeah, you can, if you have enough to do your homework at this point, that's fine.
Yeah.
No problem.
No, this is good. I always enjoy this, and we got to get deeper into your getting thrown out phenomenon, Barry.
You know, it's an old story, but it's a long and kind of funny story, and I've got lots of.
But it seems like it's part of your identity now, Barry.
Well, it is, because I've been thrown out of so many groups, Wikipedia being the biggie, and Cafe Utney, and like John Keldon's group, and a few others that are not as well known. I think I got thrown out. Well, the thing is you can get thrown out and then get back in again, because the moderators change. And so when one moderator throws you out and then they're gone, then you get back in again. So it's kind of,
I understand that.
Loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And also, just for the record, brings back this whole incident we had several years ago where somebody threw somebody else out, and we haven't even rectified that situation yet.
That's not uncommon. I mean, after I got thrown out of Wikipedia, they brought up on big charges in the Supreme Court of Wikipedia this guy who threw me out. And he was unanimously found guilty of making meritless accusations and other unethical and shenanigan behavior. And they threw him out. But they never went back and fixed up all his victims, of which I was a minor victim in terms of publicity.
Yep.
But I mean, all the victims got sort of the same bad treatment. They never went back and said, okay, we're going to restore your credentials because you were unfairly treated by this guy who was, you know.
If we actually had a system of thought and knowledge and action and jurisprudence that actually was able to trace the foundation of each action or decision or judgment, then we should be able to do this, right?
Oh, there's no question that they can go back and, I mean, I've got the record of what happened on my various websites.
But systemically, it's not done.
Exactly. And so my case was below radar. But even the ones that were above radar, you know, you have this 2-year-long, it's like Trump. You have this 2-year-long study and nothing, still, you know, never called to account and never rehabilitated the people who
Look,
got.
if Merrick Garland doesn't do something soon, I'm going to think he's on the take.
At this point, I don't have
no laughing matter. No laughing matter.
Yeah, I think he has deep concerns about how to go about this in a way.
Doesn't matter. Okay, justice is being compromised.
Well, so you're talking about retributive justice, which I don't disagree with, that they ought to do something.
I'm saying we have to go on the record that this behavior cannot be condoned. And we haven't done that so long as we haven't charged him and we haven't actually brought him to trial.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but they have a criteria that you don't bring a case to trial unless you think you can prove it.
What more evidence do we need? We've had years and years.
The lawyers know how to keep the meter running forever. They keep the meter running forever.
Yeah, and therefore justice never gets done.
That's true. That's true. That the notion that justice never gets done is not a new story. That's a story as old as history, as old as civilization.
So all this bullshit about special investigator or special prosecutor, bullshit. Yeah. I'll believe it when it happens.
See, the thing is, can you rehabilitate Trump or the likes of Trump? The answer is nobody has ever discovered.
I don't care about rehabilitating him. We need to hold him accountable first.
the problem is that if you hold somebody accountable, what are you going to do if other people are replicating the same bad behavior and are never evolving out of that pattern? You have to show that you can evolve out of it.
They'll get brought to justice also, but you got to set the precedent. If you don't set a precedent, essentially you're just allowing all of this behavior to continue.
The precedent that needs to be set is the precedent of evolving an arbitrary transgressor out of that pattern. That has not been done. We have not shown how. We've had people who have had religious conversions occasionally, but we haven't shown how to systematically evolve somebody out of a psychopathic or sociopathic or whatever, behavior pattern into good citizenship. We've never shown how to do that. And that case with Andrew Wendt, I could not evolve him into becoming a good citizen. I failed.
That's a secondary issue from holding someone accountable. You first hold someone accountable.
I don't disagree, but I don't
figure out whether you can actually then, restore this person to some kind of operational status. But that's two separate issues.
I don't disagree with that, but I think that one of the theories that's very interesting to me is that the process of holding somebody accountable, not just naming them as a transgressor, but how you treat them as a result of having named them, that treatment appears to be counterproductive. It appears to be iatrogenic. It appears to make the matter worse rather than better.
I don't get that.
Well, that's something we should talk about.
All the millions of other people who've been brought up on charges.
Because this is something that Stacy is coming around to seeing, that our treatment of people who are transgressors is in the long term making the matter worse and worse and worse over time in general for the whole population. It's not improving it for the whole population. It's whenever we hold somebody accountable and punish them, the empirical observation is it's making the whole dynamic worse for humanity as a whole.
Okay, that's arguable. I think that's fine. That's not the system of justice we have today.
Correct.
So if we believe in justice today, we have to see it in action. And if we don't see it in action, this is not the time to hold these theoretical debates. Because then, some idiot walks free and then we got tens or dozens of others following in his footsteps. And it's going to make the country go even worse.
Or you punish them and then their followers rebel and become even more violent.
Are you kidding me? Do you actually think that might happen?
What happened on January 6th? His followers rebelled.
And the point is?
The point is that whenever you forcefully, and this is the key word, forcefully push back, you raise the total amount of force in the whole system. And that process over time escalates. So you may wipe out, this perpetrator, but then you make him a martyr. And then in the next cycle, it's worse again. And that's the observation that is really, really hard. That's the observation that's really, really hard to get a demonstrable, empirical, scientific model on, that people can say, yes, now I see why in the long run, it's a failing mechanism.
I don't buy it.
I know you don't. And most people don't buy it. And the people who do buy it were the theologians who you don't believe in.
No. I'm willing to have that conversation.
Well,
I absolutely am, but I don't buy it yet. That's what I mean.
Why should you? You haven't done the research.
But I'm willing to understand. I'm willing to have these conversations.
Now, I will tell you where I sent Stacy to bone up on it. I sent her to look at James Gilligan. And I don't remember if I've ever mentioned James Gilligan to you or not.
In a past session, yes.
Yeah, but James Gilligan was I think he was the chair of the Department of Psychology, I think, or psychiatry at Harvard. And his wife is Carol Gilligan, was one of the people who worked on theories of ethics. In Nancy's course on ethics, Carol Gilligan is a prominent contributor to this whole reasoning about ethics. And she's not as well known as the guy who does the ladder, Gilligan and Kohlberg's ladder. when they teach ethics, they talk about Kohlberg's ladder, and after you do Kohlberg's ladder, then you do Carol Gilligan's Ethics of Care. And Nancy introduced Ethics of Care, which I never heard of. And now when I wrote up the whole story, what I gleaned from Nancy's course, I included the Ethics of Care and Kohlberg and all the others who did social contract theory and all that other stuff, because that was my education in how you teach ethics in college. James Gilligan is the husband of Carol Gilligan, and he had independently studied what's the root of violence in the culture. And he studied, among other things, people who were convicted of violent crimes. And he said, how did you come to be so violent? What happened? And he found a pattern of escalating practices of violence. And at the same time, people who were looking at violence in relationships, in family relationships or marriage relationships, Gilligan and these other people who were doing it in Silicon Valley and others kept finding the same root cause of violence in the culture. And I think Brene Brown also found it. The cultural practice of shaming and blaming and punishing turns out to be the primary predictor of downstream future violence. I know. I say, what? But
no, that makes sense. That
okay.
makes sense.
So this practice, this cultural practice of shaming, blaming, and punishing for a transgression, for a nameable, provable transgression, that was the primary instigator of subsequent downstream violence.
Okay, however, let's take an instance of violence. What are you going to do with that instance of violence? Are you actually going to take this person, put them into some sort of therapeutic program after a lifetime, possibly 8 decades or more of this behavior? Or do we, in any sense, hold them accountable and, in a sense, try and quote unquote make right, however, whatever that means?
Well, to make it right, one thing is, can you make the victim whole, as opposed to making the perpetrator?
Right. And in cases of murder, the answer is no.
Well, in case of murder, it's too late. But can you reduce the likelihood of a person becoming murdered in a replay of the same dynamic?
We haven't figured that out yet.
Well, some people think they have, and some people think they know how to reduce the likelihood that you will become a victim of murder from a replay of the same dynamic in the future. Now, in my case, I ended up being born in Kansas. How the hell, when my ancestors were living in Kiev and Vilnius, Lithuania, in the 19th century, how come I ended up being born in Kansas? Because they got the hell out of Eastern Europe while the getting was good. They didn't try to fix the autocrats in Europe. They said, this is a lost cause. Let's get the hell out of Eastern Europe while the getting is good, so that our grandchildren and great-grandchildren can grow up in a land where, at least at that point in history, they have a chance of not being a victim. And so I was born in Kansas. And my relatives who didn't leave Eastern Europe in the 1880s, their children died in the Holocaust. My ancestor did the right thing. They got the hell out of there. They didn't try to fix it. They got the hell out of there. And so I ended up being born. And my would-be cousins didn't.
I still think we've strayed from what does accountability mean.
Well, the point is that even if you can say Putin's a psychopath, or Trump's a psychopath, or whatever dark tetrad, or whatever the hell you want to I diagnose them as, the question is, how did they get to be that way in the first place? Because they weren't born that way.
Eric, that is a question, but it's not the question. Once the act has been committed, and once people have suffered, that's the point at which justice needs to take some action.
You're talking about retributive justice.
It can be any kind of justice we want.
Well, it can be restorative justice.
That's right. But we have a system of justice. And if we believe in it, it has to act.
Let me tell you a story. I don't believe in retributive justice.
Okay.
I don't believe in retributive justice.
Okay.
I stopped believing it when I did the scientific research in between restorative justice and retributive justice and the consequences of those practices in our culture. The long-term practices, I stopped believing in retributive justice.
What do we do today? What do we do today if you don't believe in the justice system?
Well, for one thing, what I do is I write about it. I try to educate people about it because most people don't believe in what I believe.
Barry, the question is,
No.
what does the justice system need to do?
It needs to rethink the axiomatic foundations of the system.
Yes, but that's going to take decades. What do we
Yeah,
do
well,
today?
not decades,
act-
millennia. It's taking six millennia,
Yes.
and they haven't gotten back to what's wrong with the axiomatic foundations.
Yes. So what do we do today?
We continue
Back
to
to
do
violence.
what we've been doing for 3,500 years, trying to disclose why the axiomatic foundations are bankrupt.
Okay, I understand that at the meta level, but what do we do with a specific act? Do we let it just go?
No, we lampoon the fucking hell out of it.
We're not doing that though.
I am.
Merrick Garland's not doing it.
No, because that's not his job.
He's not doing any of his jobs from what any description could be of it.
He's doing what the rule of law requires him to do. He is in an axiomatic foundation where he has to follow the axioms of mathematics, even if those axioms are bankrupt.
I argue that those axioms could have led him to action way earlier than today.
Oh, yes. So why is he
Therefore, he's not following them.
so why is he forestalling?
So he's not following his axioms.
Correct. Why?
You tell me. I don't know why. I
Because
think
he knows that they're going to be counterproductive in the long run. Now, he can't say that out
Why
loud
is he an attorney general
because he got appointed.
in a system that he doesn't believe in?
You know, he began his career as, you know, in the rule of law as a judge. He was nominated to be on the Supreme Court, and the majority in the Senate said, we don't want this guy in the Supreme Court. He's too much of a systems thinker to be on the Supreme Court. Put him somewhere else. Put him somewhere else where he can't do any harm to us corrupt politicians. But when Merrick Garland retires, and he's not that far from retirement, he will write a book. And in the book, he will say what he can't say when he's in public office.
That doesn't matter. He's not helping the country right now.
Well, yes, I won't disagree with that, but he is going to help the country eventually when he can effectively do that. He's in a position where he can't be effective. You want him to throw the book at Trump. I understand that. So there's a reason
I'm
why he's
saying
not
somebody
doing.
like Trump, with the history of actions that he's taken, cannot go scot-free.
You're saying he can't go unpunished.
He cannot go scot-free.
What does that mean? That means unpunished.
It means he needs to be put on trial. He needs to be labeled as guilty of certain transgressions, and then the system needs to then decide what to do with him.
Yes, that is a school of thought. That is the
It's
dominant
school of thought. It's the school of thought that's in this country.
It's the dominant school of thought since Hammurabi.
It's what
The dominant school of thought since Hammurabi.
justice system was based on, Barry. So it's not going to do anything if it doesn't follow its own principles.
And so why are systems thinkers balking at dropping the hammer?
I will answer you in an attempt to be a systems thinker, Barry. A proper systems thinking person has to think about not just the long term, but also the short term. You cannot just think systems thinking is long-term thinking. That's not systems thinking. Systems
Then you
thinking
get
has
the
to
cop on-
incorporate the
Then you get the
entire
cop on the beat.
spectrum
kill-
of temporal phenomena.
Then you get the cop on the beat who shoots first and asks questions later.
No, that is not what it means. That is not what it means, Barry.
That's short term. That's what short term means.
Barry, come on. Now you're exaggerating.
You said short term. What do you mean by short term?
Exaggerating, Barry. You know,
Short term means do the
don't be so
expedient
sloppy,
thing now.
Barry.
Do
Barry,
this,
don't
do
be
the
so
expedient thing
sloppy.
now and worry about the consequences later.
Barry, don't be so sloppy.
I'm not being, you brought up short term versus long term.
Yes, that doesn't
Okay.
mean, shoot from the hip thinking. No, that's not what it means.
I think in the long term, you're going to find why Merrick Garland is balking at using the machinery of the rule of law as you imagine it needs to be used. And you will be in the majority, and I will be in the
Not just
minority.
imagination, Barry. It's the law of the country
I
today.
understand, and I don't believe in the law of the country, but I'm unusual.
That is a useful, fruitful debate, but something still needs to be done. Otherwise, you're basically going to say any act of crime should just be let go.
I'm not saying that.
Yes, you are. According to what you're saying now, if you do not take something like Trump's series of actions and hold him accountable, then who needs to be held accountable? Why not him? And why others if not him?
The question is, do you want
No,
human
I'm asking
civilization
you a
to
question, Barry.
survive?
I'm asking
Do
you a
you-
question, Barry. There are many people who are held accountable. Why not hold Trump
Then
accountable?
you have to say, what does the word accountable mean? Simply to name their behavior
That's
or
a
to punish
start.
them?
That's a start. To issue a guilty judgment is a start. Was he responsible for this behavior? Yes or no? That's not a hard determination.
Did you see what Mike Pence said? Was it last night?
No. I
Oh,
was
this
asleep.
is interesting. Last night, Mike Pence spoke at, I forget the name of the event, but it's the annual event with mainly the newspapers present.
Back
And
thing?
Mike
I
Pence
thought
gave
that
a
was over.
speech. Let's talk about holding accountable. Pence, here's the headline, CNN. Wait, if it comes up here a second. Come on, come up.
Anyway, it's way
Here's
beyond.
the headline. I'm going to read you the headline. Pence says history will hold Donald Trump accountable for January 6th. Mike Pence, his vice president, says publicly, history will hold Donald Trump accountable for January 6th.
History starts today. It starts last year. It starts
started
2 years ago.
Last night he said that. Yesterday he said that.
Barry.
Not tomorrow. He said it yesterday.
Is anthropomorphic. It's humans taking action that will hold him accountable.
Mitch McConnell at the end of I think it was the second impeachment hearing, Mitch McConnell said the same thing. Mitch McConnell said he was guilty of doing these things, which we tried him for and didn't get the votes. Well, he didn't get the fucking votes from my fellow senators.
Because of him and his fucking colleagues.
Yes. And Merrick Garland sees the same problem. He's got to get the votes.
No, it's a system of justice. It doesn't require Congress.
No. The jury has to be from the people, and the jury has to be drawn from the population. And if the jury is going to convict,
if he doesn't call the jury, he's not doing his job. Anyway,
then hold him accountable.
I enjoyed this.
Then put Garland on trial and get a jury to convict Garland.
That's bullshit. He should not go on trial before Trump.
You won't get a jury to convict Garland of not doing his job. You won't get it.
Barry, I enjoy this. I would like to continue this next week if it's okay.
Okay.
Really, I do enjoy this. Okay.
Yeah. But the thing, I mean, holding people accountable, what does that mean? History, the history books, or getting a jury of people to declare a judgment. You're not going to get a jury to declare Garland guilty of not doing his job. And he can't get a jury to declare Trump guilty of January 6th, even though his vice president says
he's not even tried putting together a jury. So you cannot say that.
How do you know that? Do you know what's going on inside?
It would have been announced, would it not?
So the
First you
question
have an
is,
indictment, and then you call the jury. There hasn't been an indictment.
So what happened to the grand jury? Because there was a grand jury. What happened inside the grand jury? We don't know because it's secret.
I don't know. Anyway.
Well, find out what the grand jury said.
Okay, this is gonna go forever. I'm gonna go to brunch. Okay, Barry, can we do this?
Okay,
All right,
ciao.
thanks. See ya.
Bye-bye.